It started one dreary afternoon when I received a mysterious phone call. The sky was grey, like the blankets they give out at homeless shelters. I searched for a phone box to return the call, but I couldn't find one anywhere. I searched everywhere without luck. It was like trying to find a seagull in a flock of albatrosses. Albitri? Is it albitri or albatrosses? I don't know. Anyway. But maybe the ill-fated albatross was an omen of things to come. I threw my hands deep into my pockets, subconsciously, maybe looking for a clue or answers, but all I found was pocket lint and an old cigarette butt. Hey, Fantasy Flight Games! We've known each other for a long time now, and we love your stuff.
Yes, you bring us a BFF like every 6 months. Now, not that kind of BFF, Elaine. Even I know that friends aren't made out of cardboard. What I mean is a big Fantasy Flight game. But besides BFFs, you really like to make us go loco for Lovecraft, which is kind of cool. Here at NPI, we really like Pulp Fiction. No, not that Tarantino film. That was highly overrated and much worse than Jackie Brown. No, what I mean is a publishing model in the 1920s to 40s which focused on such genres as horror, adventure, fantasy, and sci-fi. And you're not the only ones responsible for this cephalopod craze. You see, pretty much every board game publisher has a slimy tentacle in their product catalog. I'm talking about Cthulhu Wars, to Tides of Madness, to Miskatonic School for Girls. What were they thinking with that one? Actually, we all know what they were thinking. But you see, it's your particular brand of Lovecraftian horror that really strikes true. Because it's pulp, but scary, but fantasy, but dark. And that's really, really neat. You kind of really capture the essence of Lovecraft through history and how we see him now. Minus the racism. There's no racism.
Out of all the Lovecraftian games, Mansions of Madness was our favourite. In it, all but one of you will be playing investigators who go on adventures in this grande maison de folie, and one of you will be playing the keeper who will be seeding the board with things like axes and spells and nothing of interest. And we felt like it delivered everything a board game should, but it did come at a price. It was fiddly and a bit clunky, and to be honest, maybe a bit broken. But that has changed in the mists of time and space with the second edition. And just look how big it is. Look how big.
We need to review it. The new iteration of Mansions of Madness replaces the very clunky keeper roll with an app. And boy, what an appropriately insane app it is. It just clicks and hums and buzzes at just the right times and provides tension and suspense with its inbuilt ambiance. But that tension doesn't just come from music. When you begin a game of Mansions of Madness, the app will take you through a narrated introduction into the story, and right after that it will reveal but a single tile of the not so humble abode that you are exploring, and it is full of things to poke and prod and many exits to take. What's beyond them? I don't know. It could be anything. It could be a slithering monster. Or it could be Boris Johnson. You will only find out when you take the explore action, which will then instruct you through the app to place the next tile. And you could find a trophy room with a hunting rifle strapped to the wall, except it's not strapped to the wall anymore, because the thing that you do is you immediately run into it and yank it right off. That's what's so great about Mansions of Madness 2nd edition, the ubiquitous feeling of uncertainty. You never know what is behind anything, and that is incredibly, incredibly exciting. The app doesn't just handle the suspense and the mystery of the game, it also tackles the rules. If you look at the Learn to Play guide, you can see that it's not the thinnest of rulebooks, but once you open it, you can see that it's quite sparsely laid out, and it refers to the app a lot. And that is because the app does most of the heavy lifting of the minutiae of the rules, and it makes it really quick to learn to play. In fact, when Efka was teaching it to us, he said that you basically have two actions. One is that you can move up to 2 spaces, and the second one, which you can do before, during, or after that move, is to interact
with something in the room, in which case you click on it on the app and you do the thing that it tells you to do. And for a big box game, it makes it really accessible because you can just open the box, sit down and play it. And that is unparalleled.
The app is a winner. It's incredibly seamless. And once you've tried it, or especially if you have played the first edition, you will immediately fall in love with it. And that's because it does so much of the heavy lifting. You see, it generates random maps for subsequent playthroughs. It remembers everything that it needs to remember without the need for you to having input everything. Aside from the monster damage, you actually have to input the monster damage. And it even orders Chinese food for your playgroup when it senses that your group's hunger levels have risen. That last one's actually not true.
But most importantly, it replaces the cumbersome combat mechanic with roll some dice, see how many elder signs you've got, and if you've met the target number, mark the damage on the monster. And the thing is, if you don't manage to kill the monster, don't worry about it. Just chill out, put on some gnarly Bob Marley. The app will remember all your contributions.
Every time your investigator bashes their head against the ceiling beam or traps the finger in the fridge door, they'll have to take one of these cards, and if they're lucky they'll be taking it face down. However, if they're not lucky, they have to take a face up one, which imposes extra negative effects. But your investigators obviously don't want to take these cards, so every time they're supposed to, they get to roll some dice, and depending on how many successes they get, which are elder signs, then you will be able to negate 1 damage for each of those successes. But here's the thing, on top of these damage cards, you have these cards which represent watching 3 seasons of Keeping Up with the Kardashians in a 48-hour marathon, something no mortal mind can withstand and remain intact. They are sanity cards, and every time you take one of them, you fill up this track, and that's the same with the damage cards as well. If you fill up the track full of damage cards, then you pretty much just get wounded and you carry onwards until you fill it up again and then your investigator dies. However, if you fill up this track, then you have to take a card that says you are insane and you really don't want to take this card. Honestly, these cards are a little bit of a crapshoot. They can make the game so much more interesting or sometimes just really rather dull, even though the latter very rarely happens. You see, on the back of each of these, you are given an insanity condition, what makes your particular mind go bonkers, and sometimes you'll see your friends as giant carnivorous plants and you'll feel like you just need to douse them with a heavy friendly dose of kerosene. And sometimes they'll say, you're fine, you're completely fine, nothing is wrong with you, continue as you were. But no matter how much you're trying to convince the other players that you are indeed fine, they will never believe you. See, that's the beauty of these cards. It's not how you actually feel about your insanity, it's how they feel about it. And especially if you are one of those players that likes to roleplay their conditions, boy, you'll just bring a lot of tension to the table. And that's what they're meant to do. They're meant to bring tension and uncertainty. And most of the time, they deliver on that in spades. And now imagine that 2 of the investigators you're playing with have gone insane. That is a lot to cope with, especially because it takes a single person to derail everything you worked so hard on achieving, to just break it. And that's why this particular insanity mechanism won't be to everyone's taste. You see, if you get a card that says you lose the game unless the other investigators lose the game, then you might feel like you've already lost anyway. It's like Sartre invaded this board game. What's the point anyway? But here's the thing. Whilst that sort of card might not necessarily be enjoyable to you, not every card is like that, and some players will simply revel in being a joyous traitor and working against other players. And if you are that sort of person, that's fine. Just maybe don't come to our gaming nights.
One of the things that is great about this game is the puzzles, because sometimes when you come across one of these tokens, it will reveal a puzzle to you that you'll have to solve before you can progress. And it might be to unlock a box, it might be to put some wiring back together, or it might be a subscription to the Daily Mail. You don't know. It's whatever the app and the game decides at the time. And that's the brilliant thing. All the puzzles are handled really well in the app. So if you're a bit like me and you don't have manual dexterity and have sausage fingers, then it doesn't matter because you're not fiddling with tiles and putting them in the right order and things. It does it all and it works really, really well. The only problem is that there's only 3 types of puzzle in the game. So once you've done one of them, if you come across another one, you're like, oh, haven't I done this one before?
I actually disagree. Sorry, I don't have that now. I don't think the puzzles in Mansions of Madness work well. Don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of puzzles and board games. I actually quite enjoy solving them. But I just can't help but feel that the difficulty within the puzzles varies very much. There are 3 types of puzzles that I mentioned, but one of them we encountered was a Mastermind style puzzle, if you ever played Mastermind. And it was so much more difficult than the other 2 that we spent about, I mean, we might be stupid, but we spent half an hour solving that one puzzle, and it really took us out of the game. And it was kind of a win or lose situation. If you solve that puzzle, you win the game. But I just wish that it wasn't so long. And that's the other thing. The puzzles are on an app, and to me, that makes them feel cheaper than they were before. Like in the first edition, they had this really nice tactile element of actual cardboard bits, and you put them together to get a thing. And here, it just feels like you're playing a mini game on your hand computer. It's not fun. And this is where we come to criticism number 2 of Mansions of Madness, is that sometimes it relies too heavily on this app. Not often. You see, apps in board games are a fine balancing line, and it's either there to open up a new design space, something that simply wasn't available before, or it is there to assist the players in just removing a lot of the fiddliness and legwork. And Mansions of Madness does both of that, and it does it really, really well. And I love the app, but I just wish that sometimes it wouldn't make you feel like you're actually playing the game on this app, rather with all these lovely bits of cardboard and cards and miniatures. So that fine balancing line I just mentioned, it's just ever so slightly wonky. Despite the previous 2 scenes being critical of the game, I feel like I should say we really, really love it. We love it very, very much. And it is one of the best game experiences we've had this year. I know we just said that on our Networks review, but time goes on and we play more games. And Mansions of Madness does a lot of things very, very well. And even though we're not necessarily the sort of channel that focuses on a lot of American-style games, thematic games, this one really struck a chord with us particularly, even though one of the main game mechanics is to simply roll some dice. Look at your skill, that's how many dice you're rolling, and then you roll them and you get a thing or you don't get a thing. And that was our exact criticism about Star Wars Rebellion. Yet here, packaged in this wonderful Lovecraftian story, it works. It works really, really well. But there is a problem with the game. And that's not really a criticism of the game itself, it's just a problem. And that problem is the price. You see, and I don't want to really get into this discussion about Asmodee Games acquiring all the new companies. If you haven't heard, Asmodee Games is the game company that owns Fantasy Flight Games and many other game companies, and it's been buying every game company in the world. And a lot of people are up in the arms about that, especially because new games seem to be becoming more and more expensive. But I don't think this is Mansions of Madness' fault. It's actually got nothing to do with it. It's just simply poor timing that this game was released now. So in regards to this game, yes, it is expensive. And some players have mentioned that, hey, you don't get as many things as you got in the first Mansions of Madness. I don't mind that. I don't care about that. I value the box not in terms of physical contents. I value it based on the experience that I get from it. And that to me is really important. And I think that experience you get in Mansions of Madness is terrific. You just don't get enough of it. See, the app only comes with 4 scenarios. And whereas in the previous version of Mansions of Madness, you had 3 different endings for the 5 scenarios you got in that one. Whereas every time you play a scenario in Mansions of Madness 2nd edition, you get the same ending. In fact, whilst you do get a map that is slightly different, and you know, there's a room that wasn't there before, or there's a event that kind of happens in a slightly different way, or a different monster appears than the one that did before, it largely feels the same. And so after 4 plays, you've exhausted the game, and the next time you're playing the same scenario, you won't get that same narrative experience that you got before, because you'll largely recognize all the elements, and you'll know sort of where you'll need to go. And that to me is slightly disappointing. Yes, there are more scenarios coming, and that is really important and key, because I think the thing that really needs to round out this package, which has been developed, really just, it surprised me how great everything worked. And the reason I'm so happy about this game is because I know just how much effort went into making each and every single adventure, all the bits of dialogue that you find, all the characters, all the monsters, and everything just feels cohesive and tied together. And that's great. Just wish there was more of it. And that's it. We arrived at the end of this adventure. We've exhausted the Mansion of Madness, and we've got pretty much nothing else to say apart from maybe that this game will be beloved by hosts. And what I mean by that is that if you like to have people over and deliver a fun experience to them, this is the best game that you can get, and you want to go out and buy it immediately. And if you're not a very big fan of American-style thematic games, I don't think it does a lot to change that. But if you don't mind that sort of experience, this will be a game you will treasure.
And the thing is, we really, really loved it, and we wish we could recommend it wholeheartedly, but we know the price and the fact that it doesn't come with many scenarios at launch is going to put some people off.
But what if we just ignored the price, Elaine? What if it didn't, cost as much?
Then we would definitely recommend it, yeah.
My mama cooks in Italy, mama swims in Argentina, mama's got a chunga, yeah. My mama's works in Venezuela, mama like